services companies including BillDesk, Games to Win, Corporate, Quicker, and Transfer. Do we have Mr. Mehra here? Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Mehra. And joining him are our panel members. First up, we have Mr. Rahul Chaudhary from Helion Advisors. We have Mr. Abhishek Gupta, Head, T-Lab Accelerator. Apart from day-to-day mentoring of startups in strategy, technology, product and marketing, and connecting them to mentors, advisors and investors from the industry, he's also responsible for the management and execution of the program. We have Mr. Rehan Yar-Khan, General Partner and founder of Oreos Venture Partners. His notable investments include Ola Cabs, Sapiens, Dhruva and Box, and Reach Accountant. We have with us Mr. Anirudh Suri, founder and CEO of Findable.in. He's worked at McKinsey & Company and Goldman Sachs, serving clients in the consumer, retail, healthcare, energy and the public sectors. And our final panel member for the evening, ladies and gentlemen, is Mr. Rajiv Prakash, Managing Director of Nexin Advisors. Through his firm Nexin, Rajiv mentors promising growth stage startups in technology, e-commerce and consumer products. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for our final panel discussion. We have our members right over here. Mr. Mehra, over to you.
So, welcome everybody. And the topic that we were asked to speak on was funding opportunities in the internet space. And this is a fascinating topic because you have a paradox in the market. You have really large companies raising lots of money. So you have the likes of Flipkart raising close to 3,000 crores. You have companies such as Snapdeal raising over 1,500 crores. And then you have the paradox of many young companies facing challenges to raise money in the e-commerce space. So we have a great panel here today. We have some investors who sort of fund early stage to late stage companies. And we have other investors who work very closely with companies at the stage that they're just starting up. So I think they're well positioned to help us explore this whole notion of funding in the e-commerce space. Before I start out, I just think it might be useful for all of the panelists just to provide some context on their firms and their approach towards investing in e-commerce.
I'm part of Helion Ventures, and we are a $600 million fund investing in India for the last 8 years. And from e-commerce point of view, we have investments in 5 companies. A company called Shoply, which is an online marketplace. A company called Babywear, which is an online kids apparel e-commerce company. Yapni, which is a private label brand, Fashion Hour, and a company called MySmartPrice, which is in the comparison shopping Indian space. From the point of view of investing in e-commerce, we realize that it is a capital-intensive business. So we have views based on which sector you're operating under. Is it more a marketplace? Is it a private label? Is it a horizontal? Is it a vertical? And as we go forward.
Hi, this is Abhishek Gupta. I head the accelerator T-Labs from Times Internet Limited. We invest off the balance sheet of Times Internet Limited and work with very early stage companies which have just a product, and we try to launch those companies and create a business within 4 months of time. We did one investment in e-commerce. That was our first investment in the first batch itself, which is Bluegame.com. But so far, we've invested in a lot of e-commerce enablers, starting from discovery to payments and a bunch of others, which I'll talk about later in the panel discussion.
Hi. I'm the founding partner of Oreos Ventures. We invest around e-commerce. We invest in Unbox, and I'm very proud to see the launch team here with a booth. Last year they had to stop the conference as a guerrilla. They're completely bootstrapped, and this year they have a booth, so it's very well done to them. Also invested in a company called Pretty Secrets, which is an online brand. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later. Like I said, very, very interesting time in e-commerce, and we're seeing this paradox. So I think it will be very interesting.
Hi, I'm Anirudh Suri. I run an early stage fund as well. It's called India Internet Group. We are US and India based fund. We look at and invest in companies at the very, very early stage. investing up to 200k, 250k US. Um, we have actually not been very bullish on e-commerce from our perspective, which I'll share in a little bit, but we have invested in one site called exclusively.in a few years ago that later was bought by Myntra. Other than that, we are actually very bullish on mobile commerce, but we didn't get it.
Good evening, I'm Rajiv Prakash, founder of NextGen Advisory Partners. We basically work with startups which are ready for scaling up. I mean, we basically handhold them to the entire scaling up process. So our portfolio comprises software product companies, e-commerce enablers, and some in the QSR sector. So primarily, the way we look at e-commerce today is, given a certain maturity in the market around the kind of, I would say, large firms and marketplaces which have been set up, and a certain base of customers, we believe the next stage of interesting opportunities are coming up in the form of e-commerce enablers who can serve companies in India and overseas. There are also niche opportunities in the form of hybrid commerce or export commerce, some of which I'd like to talk about today.
So thanks, that's a great introduction. And I'm going to start out with the biggest fund in the room. So Rahul, you have the privilege of helping us understand why in the world, this is a question that I think baffles many of us. Explain to us why people are willing to give $3,000 to Snowflake. Sorry to put you in a spot there, I know you're not an investor.
So, that is good. So, I think if you look at the demand and supply, as far as retail is concerned, I believe that Indian consumers want much more, which an offline retail just cannot provide in this country, and hence there is demand for e-commerce. Now, one can argue that this demand is being artificially fueled by a lot of discounts that e-commerce sites are doing, but people are still willing to pay and buy stuff, and there are a lot of times you don't get discounts and still buy online. So I think that trend has started, and I hope and I believe that that part is not going away anywhere. So I think as far as growth of the e-commerce industry is concerned, there is a lot of bullishness in general. As far as India is looked at, even within India or outside India, all the funds are good. So keeping that in mind, I think people like Flipkart, Shopclose, Snapdeal are all well placed to become large retail companies. Now, few of them work on a inventory model, few of them don't. Either way, investors are seeing a lot of potential of scale that these businesses can attain. At the same time, all of us realize that retail in general is not a high margin business, and that is true even if you look at people like Amazon in US, and that will stay true in India as well. So it is about execution efficiencies, but scale is something that people do go for as far as retail is concerned, and that is why I think a lot of players who become large are finding interest in large investors. Now the challenge is that having 5 people in same category is very hard to sustain, and which is why you will find harder for next level folks in smaller categories to get funding. At the same time, my view is that instead of trying to build another Myntra or another Flipkart, it is time to build companies in areas where there are not large guys, and still there is a reason why verticals can stand on their own, or to build private label brands. So I think there are areas of vacant spots still out there. If you try to be in the same spot as the larger guy, that will be harder, and that is where I think a lot of people are facing that challenge.
So I think there were a few points there. It seems to be that there is an advantage to building scale. There is induced content that over time, as discounts get withdrawn, consumers will go back to these websites because they will have built-in convenience, they will have built-in trust, or they will have built-in insight around the consumer. Because there's a number of, I think there was a conversation around omni-channel retail. There's a number of offline retailers looking to go online. So, I'm just trying to understand why is it that you concentrate your bets versus there being 1,000 flowers.
Yeah. So I think, as far as I see Indian retail, I think there is growth available on all fronts, both offline and online. So I believe it is unlike US where offline retail was always already saturated by the time online came in. In India, I'm sure Shoppers Style, Lifestyle and other retailers are struggling just going in the offline mode itself. So while they will try to do online, I think their main business is still not mature enough. And hence, pure online guys have an advantage at least for a few years. Now, having said that, once deals go away, I think deals is just getting started. I think it's the way of acquiring consumers. And I see a lot of time people buying because either the product is not available otherwise, or it is the convenience of not wanting to go into a, through the traffic and trying to buy stuff. So there are a lot of other reasons why e-commerce will continue to grow. And as far as targeting customers are concerned, I think that is a maturity level that again I'm starting to see a lot of e-commerce companies building analytics in-house to figure out what to sell to which customer.
Okay. Anirudh, you mentioned that you had funded an e-commerce company, I think it was around 2009, called Exclusively, 2010, and that did receive sort of a lot of follow-on capital and was in an interesting area. So why is it that you're not excited about this space?
So I think the couple of reasons why I'm not particularly excited from our fund's perspective. So it's not generally about the industry. From our fund's perspective, I think a very simple point is we're a small fund doing small sort of seed investments, and any e-commerce company, as Rahul was saying, is going to suck up a lot of capital as it scales. And without scale, it does not really win in the long term. So for us, it's actually almost pointless to invest in a company that needs scale inherently, where a lot of capital is required. Right? So it's just a structural reason why I'm not bullish from our perspective to invest in e-commerce. That said, I think there are reasons why e-commerce enablers and a lot of other things that a lot of us have said related to e-commerce that we would obviously look at investing in, because the moment you have a business that needs to scale and grow big and sustain at that level and then compete for very low margins, right? That means you need a lot of help in getting that operational efficiency, user acquisition efficiencies and all that. And those are the kinds of players that I think a lot of us are now looking at least the ones that are running smaller firms.
So Riyan, you have obviously been around in the space for a long time. You've done your own e-commerce business, and you've also funded businesses that some of us categorize as e-commerce, but you sort of have a different nomenclature for them. So, just help us understand how you see e-commerce and the investing opportunity.
I built an e-commerce business. I built an e-commerce business starting in 2004. I think that was the first wave of e-commerce companies getting started in India. When I started investing, it was 2008, 2009. At that time, what I noticed is that e-commerce, they've already gone through several rounds of funding, and there is some sort of maturity coming in the space. And I was an individual investor, so I couldn't, of course, participate at those levels. So we started looking at seed companies at that time. And so we funded, for example, we funded Unboxed a couple of years ago. And so the thesis there is that since this e-commerce industry is being built, and there are a number of sites out there, Jabong, etc., how do you sort of latch on to that to all that traction that's happening? So what Unboxed does is it provides a search box within these websites and allows you to search. Now, search accounts for between 10 to 20% of your business. People come and type white shirts or whatever it is in that box, and those results better be accurate and high quality and to the way your merchandisers want those results. So instead of investing in the e-commerce company, where the game had already moved far ahead, we started investing in companies such as these. Another company we invested in was Pretty Secrets. Now, Pretty Secrets is a lingerie brand. They own an e-commerce store. So what that means is they can leverage all the e-commerce stores out there, Jabong, Myntra, etc., to actually distribute their brand. Right? So these stores are doing multiple crores of lingerie sales online. So the way you do it, the next wave, e-commerce 2.0, as I would call it, since e-commerce 1.0 is pretty done, is that you build services which leverages what has already been built. Right? So thus we funded Pretty Secrets, which can leverage all this. So that was sort of our take on the whole system.
That's helpful. Abhishek, you're the only sort of accelerator, the formal accelerator on the panel, and you obviously see a number of e-commerce opportunities, and you mentioned in the first batch you had an e-commerce company. So what has been sort of from a very early stage standpoint, what would you advise be to entrepreneurs who are building e-commerce companies, and sort of what has been your take on it?
Sure. And as Rahul mentioned, it's a very capital intensive business. So after first batch where we did one company, we start doing general e-commerce, the e-commerce 1.0 company that Rehan is talking about. But not to say that we have not done e-commerce enablers or e-commerce discovery companies or other companies, and I'll take certain examples. But even the one company that we did, Bluegate.com, it did not turn out to be e-commerce. It turned out to be, and it used what I call, what Rehan said, Jabong, Myntra, Flipkart. They are platforms. You can treat them as platforms and build Pretty Secrets as a brand, which would not have been possible 2 or 3 years or 4 years back, right? So even Bluegate, it turned out to be, they started selling t-shirts and customized things, but they figured out that there's already too much clutter in the market, and they figured out this white space where they would enable any brand to get their merchandise out. So they've now done a couple of films, including Chris 3. The merchandise of Chris 3 was on Bluegate.com, as well as it was present at Myntra, Jabong, Flipkart, and everybody else. So they're leveraging this platform that others have created with a large distribution network, and they completely got into that white space, and they're doing very well. Similarly, if I get into other spaces, we have another company which started with a peer-to-peer payment. But what happened was, then they got 200,000 downloads because of those peer-to-peer payments and referral. And now they are getting merchants onto their platform so that you can pay Domino's just by your phone. It's a wallet, right? Now, there is an e-commerce element to it, and that's what I think Rehan is referring when he says e-commerce 2.0. We have gotten e-commerce 1.0, these big platforms. They enable us to go online and leverage surrounding opportunities or discovery platforms and get to e-commerce 2.0 companies. So we'll still do. In fact, if you look at a lot of our companies, they are on the periphery of e-commerce, but not necessarily generic e-commerce where you're selling something.
Got it. So e-commerce enablers, and so Rajiv, you spent some time as an operating manager in an e-commerce company, and then you were helping young entrepreneurs who are setting up companies in the space. The one thing that intrigued me was, you're speaking outside and you mentioned that a number of companies that are just starting out or are very early don't understand how to navigate sort of the fundraising environment till they get to being sizable in terms of scale and approaching institutional investors. So what would your guidance be to young entrepreneurs who are looking to just get started, have a great idea, and it's in the sort of e-commerce space, e-commerce adjacency? How do you advise them to approach sort of their funding needs?
In the conversation that I've been having in this room also, it looks like funding is a critical problem which is being faced by both early stage and later stage entrepreneurs. I think we could have got into a model where businesses are increasingly becoming stage-to-stage fund dependent, and success in one stage is not necessarily becoming assurance of the next stage funding. So a lot of time of the entrepreneur, often almost 50 to 60%, is getting into fundraising. Now, for the early stage entrepreneurs, there's an often question in terms of when do I really become eligible for funding? Because a strong assumption is when reads everywhere about strong angel networks coming up and a strong angel investing culture, people automatically equate that to a kind of supply side phenomenon where you'll end up getting money even at the product development stage of a concept proof. But the sense one has, at least from the startups that we've been working with, which are in the SaaS space, e-commerce enablers, and also in some of the other QSR sectors, is whether one is looking at raising funding from professional angels or from, let's say, micro VC situations. There's a strong expectation that your venture has become a business. That means there got to be real customers, real revenues, and a business where now money can start making a difference. Money is not available to a very large extent, for product development or proving a concept. So, from the portfolio of firms that have been working the last 2 years, we've been realizing that the entrepreneurs mentally have to be prepared for a bootstrap situation for a reasonably long time, often up to at least a couple of years. If you are in the enterprise space, it probably takes almost 5 years, okay, for your enterprise idea to become a business. So if you got to be self-raising money for 2 years, then it's about money coming in through your network. There's the friends and family, but also networking enough to identify a lot of individual angels who start believing in your business. Some of them may be over here. Increasingly one finds people also raising money from angels from overseas because there's a strong belief in the Indian internet and e-commerce sector. So raising money almost entirely from your own sources, okay, and your own networks, okay, seems to be the kind of conclusion we seem to have drawn, okay, for the starters we're working with. Often they're attacking new problems for which the market is not yet ready from a risk appetite to fund.
So fair enough. You know, if I was listening to this conversation, the takeaway I'd have is that, you know what, there is no early stage funding available for e-commerce startups. And I think at some level that's not true. You know, there's people like Rahul who run Helion who raised $200 million or more in a new fund, and I'm assuming that you want to fund in the area of e-commerce. So as you think about e-commerce, is it all about growth investing, or are there adjacencies or e-commerce enablers that you're interested in? And can you give people an example of the kind of things that would interest you in terms of funding?
Sure. So if you broadly look at e-commerce, there is this horizontal retailing, there is vertical retailing, there is private label, and then there are marketplaces. So clearly, I think there is still gap left on the vertical retailing part, and over time you will see vertical marketplaces also emerging, which is already happening in several countries around the world, and it will happen in India, but maybe not today. It is maybe 3-4 years out. But around vertical retailing, I would say anything which is unstructured and not yet covered, which is where apparel, shoes, accessories is kind of covered. But things like home, I would say is still open. Selling to businesses is still open. There are few startups which are out there, but I don't think they're figured, or they're not yet. There are no large players out there. So at least those two areas clearly in my mind stand out. One could have argued jewelry, but I think there are enough players out there. None of them have scaled enough, but at least that space is large enough. So the way I look at vertical retailing is how large is the offline market, and even if 4-5% of that over 5 to 7 years can come online, is that large enough market? And some of these markets do at least qualify on that front. And then you get into, I think we were, outside this panel we were discussing things which are, I would say, around lead gen model. So to me, Polybor in US is a lead gen model. And Vonulu in US, again, while they do a bit of e-commerce, but they're again a lead gen model. So there are those kind of businesses which are, in my mind, really version 2.0 of e-commerce, which is without spending too much of marketing money or keeping inventory. How do you get customers and make enough money out of it? And then there are e-commerce tools. So to me, something like Unboxed is an e-commerce tool, WebEngage is an e-commerce tool. So those are interesting businesses. Now, for a fund like us, the only challenge will be just building them on the back of Indian e-commerce company and not make it a large company. So then some of these businesses have to go outside India. They may start with India as a test market because there are enough e-commerce companies, but then they have to start selling outside India, which is what most of these businesses start doing.
Right. So you mentioned lead gen as one area that sort of is a different cut to e-commerce, and I'd almost put classifieds in the same bucket as lead gen. Anirudh, have you guys had any experience, exposure to the classified space, and sort of have you all developed a point of view on vertical classifieds as an opportunity?
Well, to be honest, no.
Okay. Okay. I just thought, Riyan, you guys have obviously seen sort of classifieds.
Yeah, I think there's some very interesting things happening. There's also re-commerce which is happening, which is kind of, it's adding a twist to classified. So if I list my phone on
he doesn't like Riyan.
I think freezing AC, gone off. So re-commerce, we're seeing interesting innovation. So re-commerce is an interesting innovation on the whole classified process. So I list on a classified site like Quikr or OLX, but as a buyer, I don't know the quality of that product, right? And recourse is very hard. So when you get a bad phone, what do I do? So what re-commerce does is they sort of pick up those phones and they certify it, they say, okay, for 6 months, we give you a warranty and they repackage it. And so that's a very interesting take on the whole classified thing. So that's one thing we're seeing. I think the point Rahul raised on the whole B2B space is very interesting. Earlier on, Abhishek had raised a point on virtual commerce, right, which is virtual products being sold to people. So I think these are also very interesting spaces.
Not to sort of say that, I think I agree with your point, Rahul, about the 2 points you made, which were good, was either you figure out how to do user acquisition cheaply, right, or you figure out how to get your unit economics right. Otherwise, right? And that's where a lot of e-commerce companies are sucking money, right? Those two things. And so if there are e-commerce models, whether that's only lead gen or not, that solve those two problems differently, that's when I think investors will also become a lot more bullish. Because right now I think we're not seeing, at least from my perspective, and we don't look at e-commerce very closely, we're not seeing that much innovation in the way we could actually sell or generate leads online. Because really time spent on online, time spent on mobile, we haven't talked about mobile commerce. And there's probably an opportunity for either in the local commerce space or mobile commerce space for a startup to come and build a product matching these two criteria, user acquisition cheaply, something that LimeRoad has tried to do, right? Similar to Polyvo that you were mentioning, where you use social as a user acquisition channel, so you reduce your user acquisition costs, and then I think you have interesting business potential. Now, what those solutions look like, I don't know.
I understand. But you mentioned an interesting point. You said user acquisition costs and unit economics. And I think, this has been the bane of most e-commerce companies' existence. On the one hand, you have investors telling e-commerce companies that we want to see growth. And growth comes from sort of new users. And it comes from providing deals. And on the other hand, you have investors saying, show us how you make money. In an environment where there's an arms race, how do you deal with it? So, I want to ask Rajiv this question. Rajiv, you mentioned early on in the conversation that startups that are looking to get started have this journey towards sort of trying to get to a destination where they'll get funding, potentially. Some people should never look for funding, and some people may be looking for funding. So do you have any advice for someone, again, who is facing this conundrum of building a business that can generate positive cash flow, but may not be large enough to attract venture capital, or can grow really fast, but needs venture capital, or they might go off a cliff? How do you advise young companies that are looking to deal with this?
I think the kind of funding model is one of the risks the entrepreneur takes. And it's really going to come down to the risk appetite of the entrepreneur. Not every business is being built only for the purpose of seeking venture capital funding. I come across a number of entrepreneurs, especially those from the services space, who are realistic that services, is not the kind of segment, which attracts the kind of risk capital which products and some of the consumer internet plays get. But they're perfectly fine setting up services businesses, but services businesses are inherently, tend to have a strong cash flow, they're profitable, and you can sustain it based upon the same cash flows. And they may be linear, enough not to be very interesting for an equity risk investor, but it's an independent business by itself. And we are seeing, especially in the area of people connecting offline brands, to online marketplaces, a number of these kind of service-intensive ventures coming up, and they're scaling up well. Within a year or two, having 40 to 50 brands, reasonable cash flow, that's an interesting part. But at the same time, there might be other entrepreneurs who believe that they're being significantly disruptive, either in terms of a particular consumer category like Rahul mentioned, something which is a difficult to solve category, like for example furniture and how Urban Ladder did it. Or it could be a component or an e-commerce enabler, where they feel they can get into very rapid consumer acquisition both in India and overseas, and are willing to take that kind of risk of building an operation size but not necessarily a revenue size, and believe that's going to be the basis for funding. Now, in such a scenario, what I've seen is just making funding a leap of faith. The entrepreneur almost needs to make his startup a kind of currency of conversation amongst the investors reasonably early. There's a very significant need for networking earlier on and I think the idea of stealth and speed from olden days, in speed, right, continues to be a virtue. In a world where things have become so transparent, stealth appears to be less of a virtue nowadays. So to be known early enough to become a strong currency and be connected is becoming important for especially those kind of startups where funding is becoming critical.
Abhishek, I know you're struggling with a cold, but notwithstanding, you spoke about e-commerce 2.0. Can you help us understand within the T Labs that the past batches that you've just seen, what are the two most innovative companies that you'd say are using business model innovation or technology innovation to address e-commerce, but maybe adjacent areas to e-commerce?
Sure. One I previously said, Happy. They started with a simple payment wallet. So this was just an app where you could pay each other. It's a peer-to-peer payment. You have to just fund your wallet once, and you go ahead and pay, and there's no transaction cost when you pay each other, right? And they started with this referral program. So it's a business model innovation that they did, or marketing innovation they did, that for 10 rupees, they will pay the 10 rupees to you if you refer to anybody. And they were supporting recharge at that point. And recharge is hard, right? Free recharge, 10 rupees you're getting. And by the time they launched that, within a week they had like 3,000, 4,000 users. And within 3 months they had 60,000 downloads, right? This traction was amazing, right? And now the initial model was that they will get merchants. So they got to Domino's, they went to Cafe Coffee, and everybody said, it's a chicken and egg problem. If you don't have users, who would pay for it? So they had these users now, and they're going back to Domino's, and they're much accepted there because they right now underwritten obviously by a bank. They're going to merchants again, which became again an e-commerce model, supporting model, right? In fact, very interesting point. I'll take an example, not exactly in e-commerce, but in education. But I'll show what Anirudh said, that you have to divide the problem into two parts. There is at one part somebody who can work the unit economics, but at the second part there is somebody who understands online world. Right? And a lot of Polywar, etc. are that example, because if you remember the statistics of 2010, I remember that during the Let's Buy days, the user acquisition cost was 1,200 rupees. Right? For most e-commerce company where the margins are so less, you won't be able to recoup that cost whether in 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, right? And that was beginning of the e-commerce. Now some of these people who understand online very well, who can do SEO very well, there are a bunch of other companies, and Polywar is a great example because now user is generating that content and their user acquisition cost is probably just 200 rupees, 100 rupees, and they're helping other e-commerce companies to buy. So similarly, one of our companies, Great Stack, so far they're selling e-commerce, which is, a bunch of others are doing meditation and others, right? They're selling content that is provided by somebody else, right? So far in education space, what we had seen was that the content people were doing the business, right? They were good in content, but they were not good in distribution. These guys were techies. They said, we'll not touch the content. We'll take the content from the content providers. We know distribution. So they created this SEOable books where the content would be searchable, right? So now, if you know the education space, you will know that there's almost 600 to 800 rupees acquisition cost. That's just what is killing Merit Nation. These guys have an acquisition cost of 20 to 30 rupees. Now, if you match both of these unit economics and people who understand the online distribution space, that's where you are creating a very heady cocktail of success.
Great, that's really helpful. So, we have a little time left to take some questions from the audience. So I just want to check if there are any questions from the audience. Otherwise, yeah, the lady there.
Hi, this is Saloni Sanghu. I just have one question. When you're investing in a company, what are the key parameters or criteria that you really look at in a company, right? Because in this space, there are a lot of companies doing similar things, etc. So what are the key differentiating or key parameters that you're looking at?
So, I think there are few things which are generic, which is not sector dependent. One being the team itself, as in how strong the team is, and if there are gaps, can they be filled in. Size of the market is very important. Good part is retail in general is a very large market. which is why I think a lot of people are attracted to this space. $400 billion market, hard to get any other market of that size. But then if you go break it up and say which market you are playing in, is it large enough? And then you put another filter of how many of them, how much of that will ever get sold online. So size of the market becomes very important. I think as of today, the next question you get asked is, why can't a large guy do this over time? And which is why I was pointing toward the things like unstructured categories or categories that require consultative sale or require a different kind of sale, which cannot be done by a large organization. So that is essentially one of the differentiation. You can have other differentiation also. You can say I'm running my own brand, and that stands for something. So that could be a differentiation as to why you can compete with a large guy. But that will be a very standard question that will get asked. And then obviously use of money. So depending on the industry you're talking to, can they support you long enough, in your journey to growth? At least those would be few things that people would look for when trying to invest.
I'd add one or two more things. So I think a deep understanding of the space that you're entering, I think often gets ignored just because the space is large and the team seems good from general smartness, intelligence, experience perspective, doesn't actually mean that they will actually be able to execute well. So I would look, even if the background of the person is not in there, have, over the last few months or year or two, whatever it is, have they actually gained an understanding of that space more than at least me when I'm evaluating. If I tend to know more than they do, that's a bad sign, right? So that's, I think, another thing to consider. And the second thing we tend to look at is going back to a little bit of what I said earlier, which is we try and identify what the key stumbling block in that business would be. If it's user acquisition, or if it's distribution, or if it's inventory, whatever it is, unit economics, then what we try and look for is the team thinking about that problem innovatively and not trying to do the same thing as has been done before to tackle that particular problem in that sector.
Great question, yeah.
I'll just add some slightly different additional perspective. I think what you'll find is different levels of investors look for different things. Right? So when you go to the incubators, for example, which is actually your first level, they probably look at concept and how unique is the concept, and then sort of add to that. When you go to the next level of guys, which are sort of the seed funding guys, they will then look at, is there some data around what you have done? Is this concept validated? And I think then when you go to the funds, right, they will look at it a little more deeply. So I think it's important, depending on where you are, that you approach the right type of organization.
So we actually go to very basics. We, as Rahul said, we only look at the team. If the team is good, we know that they can tackle. So you have to understand the point that we are. There is no business. There is just a product or an MVP that people come with. So it's the strong team, and that's what has worked for us. That understands, and Anirudh says that as well. If they understand the different parts of the puzzles, they can put together. That's good enough for us.
So we have time for two more questions.
Yeah. So we've got a few large e-commerce players like your Jabongs and Myntras and Flipkarts and Snapdeals. Do you think even within them there's going to be consolidation in the near future, and then the future of e-commerce lies in the long tail, where private labels get online and use these channels to gain traction?
I think there's a message of hope there, and I think I would tend to agree, but I'm going to let one of the panelists take that. Anyone want to jump in? Rahul.
I don't think large guys are out there to merge unless it's a question of desperation. If they are not, and unfortunately e-commerce is about continuously raising money. So if they have a
front end is pretty similar. You see these top 4-5 size at front end.
I don't think so. So it depends on how you look at it. To me, Amazon, Flipkart is one category, Snapdeal is different, Jabong and Myntra are very different. So I don't think they're all same companies.
4 or 5 top players, I don't think the consolidation will happen, but look at the history. The consolidation happens in any industry. So these guys will start to cobble more of the $100 million company, and they will start becoming big. So that consolidation will come.
But to the second part of your question, which is will an ecosystem develop around this? I think that it's fair to say that if you think of unbundling e-commerce and you think of product discovery, you think of buying, if you think of consumer acquisition, if you think of payments, if you think of logistics, and take each of these as separate business opportunities, I think if you were to start out there and go after the big guys, I think you could find that you could be best in class in that. And there's a number of small retailers who are looking to come online, which could be a very large market opportunity. So I think e-commerce 1.0 is done, but to the point I think Priyan was earlier making, e-commerce 2.0 will be about unbundling of e-commerce and really going after specific areas.
Which, according to you, is a more attractive business model? A pure play online game that's pure e-commerce, or a multi-channel, an omni-channel, or a hybrid kind of a model where a company is having a few physical stores and going online? Which, according to you, at the current scenario, is a more attractive business model?
So Rajiv, I'm going to ask you to take this because you've at some level had some experience with this. So, do you have any thoughts on e-commerce versus omni-channel? So, as much from an operating perspective as funding perspective, definitely some funding perspective.
Yeah, talk it a little bit more on the from operating perspective side. So my experience is primarily at 2 points of hybrid channels. One is when I was running Future Bazaar earlier as part of Future Group, and now working with some startups who primarily are focused on the hybrid commerce model. I think when you're looking at a hybrid commerce model where the primary engine is a legacy offline business, even though I think intuitively it looks very attractive, but the practical issues of execution are very significant. And despite we are in a world where there's so much of traction in e-commerce, the belief system and the way the organization needs to change, to allow online to work cohesively with offline, is still a very significant change management problem. And whether it's a large company or mid-sized company, I still haven't seen many where their own e-commerce ventures outside of what they do on the marketplaces have crossed 5 or 10% of revenues. They do far better when they kind of sell on an online marketplace, which is a very different situation. So for me, if you're a legacy retailer building up an online business, it's still going to be a long journey of learning, and there's got to be more successful models. However, there are some models coming in. For example, there is one particular venture within our system at Nextin, a company called iPay. They are trying to take the kiranas and the stationers and the medical stores and helping convert them into e-commerce points or trust points. Now we are seeing very interesting traction in something like this because there's a lot of entrepreneurship in India at kirana level, and they want to do what it takes to retain and grow their customer base. So having simple technology which allows them to sell a variety of more digital merchandise and e-commerce products through their channels, we're seeing interesting consumer traction over there. And I believe just like some people are getting offline to online, the idea of getting online through offline is looking like a very interesting problem. One, given the fact it covers large numbers of consumers who probably are not yet comfortable or able to transact using the e-commerce channel. So these are the two areas. As far as pure play online goes, I think number of points have already been made in terms of where people see value in online e-commerce.
So that's great. I think that's all the time that we had. The panelists are going to be around and sort of will be available post this. I want to thank everyone. I think the top 3 takeaways that I'd have is e-commerce in India is here to stay. E-commerce 1.0 is well funded and is hard to disrupt. E-commerce 2.0 is about finding niche areas to go after or finding enablers around this ecosystem. And candidly, there's a lot of capital available. That's the message of hope. But let's not try and replicate what's already been made. We need to have something unique. So thanks for your patience.
One more takeaway. We should have less cold event spaces.
So on that happy note, thank you all for being patient with us.